Hey, good morning. Paige Browning here. It's Saturday. This is Seattle Now. Today we're bringing you the best from the KUOW Newsroom. We'll start with a story about a South Seattle family who self-deported to Guatemala earlier this week. The family of three with their cat in tow left on Wednesday after losing their asylum case. Casey Martin has their story.
Thank you for traveling with us.
Dylan has never been on an airplane before. And before his very first flight, the 10-year-old is bawling. It's early on Wednesday morning at SeaTac Airport. Dylan, his 3-year-old sister, and his mother, Darlene, are pulling some suitcases. Their gray cat, Luna, peeks out from a carrier. The family is headed back to Guatemala after losing their asylum case. We're only using their first names because of their legal status. Here's Darlene, speaking through an interpreter.
Nos encontramos un poquito tristes.
We're sad this morning, and I honestly don't know how to describe all the things that we're feeling.
Darlene says she left Guatemala in 2021 after getting robbed and physically threatened. She and her kids lived in South Seattle, where Dylan went to school. They found out last month that they'd have to leave or face detention. When Dylan's teachers heard about it, they rallied in support. This is his 4th grade teacher, Tillman Giebel, in December.
Dylan's family is under considerable stress and hardship due to their current situation. I see this every day in the classroom for Dylan.
Giebel and others then spoke at a Seattle Public Schools board meeting, calling on the district to stand up for migrant families and help stop ICE officers from coming on school grounds.
Currently, we are doing our best to stay strong for Dylan and to show support for his family.
Teachers say that some schools have talked about individual procedures, but they want district-wide guidance.
As a teacher, I'm trying my best to navigate the situation, and I would be lying if I said that this didn't affect me as well. It hurts me to think of the effect that this deportation could have on Dylan and other students and families.
At the airport, Dylan wrote a letter to his Seattle classmates, friends he may never see again.
Thanks for being my best friend, and I will never forget that time that you gave me snacks.
The self-deportation was not a quick process, at least for them. The family ended up waiting the entire day at the airport, often surrounded by a group of airline employees, TSA agents, and airport staff. They missed their morning flight, waiting for an ICE agent to bring travel documents. And Darlene had to figure out if she should remove her ankle monitor, something she's worn for 2 years. She ended up cutting it off with scissors she borrowed from the ticket desk. When she gets to Guatemala, Darlene's troubles are still far from over.
She's going to need to get set up with a job, long-term housing. Children need to get enrolled in school.
Raiden Kahlberg is with an advocacy group that helped the family plan the trip and get a motel in Guatemala City.
There's not people waiting for her there necessarily in Guatemala.
Darlene was able to book a new flight for almost 12 hours later. The kids spent the day sitting on the ground at the airport, sometimes taking Luna, the cat, out to cuddle. Darlene says she's worried to take them to a country she fled out of fear. She made this hard decision after determining that an ICE arrest would traumatize her children.
Pues primeramente Dios, que estemos bien.
I want my children to be okay, to be well, and for things to be good for them. I don't want anything bad to happen to my children.
Inculcándoles el bien.
Dylan says he wants to come back to Seattle someday, and hopefully, he says, his old friends will still be here. At the airport, I'm Casey Martin, KUOW News.
Our next story today comes from Bellingham. The city's conducting an internal investigation after evidence was uncovered a staffer may have rigged a bidding process for a city contract to favor one vendor over another. State and federal laws usually require government entities to create a neutral bidding process to prevent vendors from rigging a bid. That rigging is known as procurement fraud, and it's nothing new. What is new, though? The employee allegedly used ChatGPT to skew the outcome. At least one expert says this might be the first time AI has been at the center of this kind of scandal. KNKX reporter Nate Sanford, along with Cascade PBS, broke this story, and Kim Malcolm talked with Sanford about it in a recent interview.
Nate, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
So, Nate, how exactly did you uncover this alleged bid rigging? Yeah, so last summer, I filed a series of records requests with cities all across the state, basically just asking for records of government officials using ChatGPT. I was curious if people were using it in the first place and also what types of things governments were using it for. And I ended up getting back thousands and thousands of pages from all sorts of different cities. It was really, really interesting and illuminating. But kind of in the process of that, there was this one chat log that stood out. So basically, this city employee was working on creating an RFP, a request for proposals, to solicit applications for this contract for a new city utility billing software for Bellingham. And in one message, they asked ChatGPT to write contract requirements that would, quote, exclude this one specific company without explicitly saying so. And in another message, they asked ChatGPT to write requirements that would favor a different company. And some of the language that ChatGPT created in response to that actually made its way in.
And you spoke with a lawyer who's an expert in these kinds of issues. And he looked at those messages between the staffer and ChatGPT. They stood out to him as well. What was so troubling to him about those messages?
Yeah, and he said he can't issue like a concrete legal conclusion, and neither can I really. But I think what raises a red flag about those messages is that local governments have to follow this pretty strict set of rules when they're entering into contracts and buying stuff. And the rules are there for fairness, for transparency, for neutrality. We want to make sure that taxpayers are getting the best deal possible.
So far, there aren't any financial or personal links that have come up between the staffer and the company that have been revealed so far. Do you know what was behind the employee's decision to favor one over the other?
Yeah, it's not entirely clear, and they didn't respond to requests for comment. There were a few messages that seemed to indicate they were more kind of just driven by a sense of urgency. They felt like they had done a bunch of research and identified the best company already through that process, and felt that going through this whole RFP process would be kind of redundant. It'd be an extra hoop to jump through. So there is that, but it is still a little unclear. And even if it was just sort of a desire to save time, that is still something that's not necessarily aligned with the rules around public procurement.
You spoke to people at the city of Bellingham. What have they said about this?
They weren't aware of this until I reached out, and they said they're taking it pretty seriously. The mayor says that they're basically bringing on an independent fact-finding investigator to look into this and figure out what happened, because they feel like there's still a lot of context that they don't have. They're trying to figure things out. But the mayor really did stress that they're taking it seriously. If indeed this is what it looks like, that wouldn't be acceptable.
So, Nate, you came across this while you were working on a series about how governments are using AI. Are there any concerns that people are bringing up to you about government workers' use of AI compared to people in other sectors of the economy?
Yeah, I think so much of the debate around AI is really polarized, and people have pretty strong feelings about a lot of the different ways that it's used. I think in the earlier stories we published, there were a lot of different examples of people using it for researching legislation, things like asking it for policy advice, asking it for help writing speeches, writing talking points, writing press releases. And there were some examples of people using it also to respond to emails from constituents. And I ended up, calling one of those constituents who received an AI-generated email response to something they'd sent to the city. And they were pretty upset when I told them that this response they'd gotten from the city was someone had copy-pasted their email into ChatGPT and asked it to generate a sympathetic response. Even though the response itself probably wasn't that different from what a human would have written, I think there was still kind of this feeling of inauthenticity and this kind of feeling that, like, well, if they're not going to take the time to respond to me, why should I read it? And there are lots of people out there who would not have a problem with that, but I think some people also do still have strong feelings about it being used that way, especially when it's your elected officials and your representatives. But I think it's a really quickly evolving thing, and I think everyone's still figuring out what the norms and standards should be.
Nate Sanford is a reporter for KNKX.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thank you to our donors for your generous support. You can give a gift right now by clicking the link in the show notes, or support the show by following and rating Seattle Now on your podcast app. That actually helps and gets more people to our show. Today's feature was reported by Casey Martin. Today's interview was produced by Shane Mailing. Our production team includes Caroline Chamberlain-Gomez, Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, Andy Hurst, and Patricia Murphy. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Paige Browning. Talk to you next week.